My name is Julie, and I'm 30 years old. I work for a foreign investment company. My husband James has a job in services, but his contract is not stable because it gets renewed every year. This uncertainty makes us worried, especially towards the end of the year. James' family values government jobs a lot because his parents used to work for the government, and his sister still does. They don't really respect my job in a private company. Since we got married, we've been living with his family, who always make me feel bad about working for foreigners. In investment firms, the main goal is to make money and pay employees. Some people believe that those who work in private companies couldn't get government jobs. And if you work for a foreign company, it's because you couldn't find a job in a local company. James grew up thinking this way because of his family. So even though his job isn't permanent, he sticks to it because it gives him a certain status and salary. Once, I asked James, who was feeling anxious about his job, if it's safer to have a permanent job in a regular company than being a temporary worker in a government job, especially towards the end of the fiscal year. He quickly replied, "If I'm not a civil servant, it's better not to work at all." It seems like my husband hasn't told his parents that he's working as a temporary government employee, so he keeps asking me to keep it a secret. Also, because of his British nature, he boasts about getting promoted. It's a lie I don't understand, but he wants to keep up appearances to his parents and sister. He doesn't show me his salary statement, but only a small amount is deposited into the account. I asked, "This is James, he's a section manager now. His salary must have increased, right? How much is it now?" My husband quickly replied with just 4 words, "You can earn so much these days." I know I earn a good amount, but I'm not sure how it compares to what a section chief civil servant makes. I work as a bond trader, and most of my salary comes from commissions. Lately, I've been making consistent profits, so compared to other employees in regular companies, I earn quite a bit. When my husband mentioned the amount of money, my mother-in-law looked impressed, but she couldn't compare it to what people earned in her time. "But it seems James is doing well," she said proudly. His sister, who works at the city office, overheard our conversation. If he worked at the city office, he might be at the level of a division head. "Government jobs do pay well, don't they?" she commented. Seeing everyone's reactions, my husband looked even more uneasy. He seemed to regret bringing up my salary and swiftly changed the subject. "Let's not talk about salaries anymore. By the way, someone from the housing company visited recently. Are we considering renovations for this house?" He changed the topic. A sales rep from a housing company had indeed paid us a visit. Sensing my husband's train of thought, I decided to go along with the topic of home renovations. As for remodeling the kitchen, we were. But my mother-in-law cut me off abruptly, shouting, "Stay out of family matters. You're just a daughter-in-law. Keep quiet and do as you're told." She glared at me with a scared look. It seems like she's always unhappy with what I say and do. The main reason for her dissatisfaction seems to be that I'm not a government worker. She's particularly bothered by the fact that I manage my husband's salary and give him an allowance. My mother-in-law thinks my husband earns a lot, and she believes I control all of his money. But in reality, most of his salary goes towards his personal expenses, and our living costs are mostly covered by what I earn. As for my sister-in-law, she doesn't contribute anything to our expenses. You're taking money from an elderly couple who only have their pension. James earns a lot, so you're not struggling, right? She says, without any intention of helping out. Living in my husband's family home means we don't have to worry about paying rent, and we can manage with just my salary. But the atmosphere at home is undeniably tense. Unable to join the conversation about the housing company, I hurriedly cleaned up the kitchen after dinner. Neither my mother-in-law nor sister-in-law offered to help with the housework. After finishing my job, I rushed back home to cook, clean, and do laundry without a break. One good thing about working for a foreign company is that I don't have to work overtime as long as I do my job well. Being able to leave work on time is a relief. It helps me keep my work and personal life separate, and I don't have to bring work home, which is a big advantage. On his days off, my husband works on his computer at home. I worry if it's okay for him to bring work home and do it there. When I tried to ask him about it, he said, "I can't work overtime, and if I don't finish on time, I get in trouble." "Don't worry about it. It's not your concern." Ironically, I was the one being scolded. Lately, my husband has been in a bad mood, and he gets angry as soon as I try to talk to him. He even yelled at me when I asked about the housing issue. It's none of your business. Didn't Mom tell you that already? Just follow the rules. That's all you need to do. Despite taking care of the household chores and finances in his home, I'm unhappy with my husband's attitude of keeping me in the dark. One day, someone from a home building company came to my in-laws' house with a computer. Everyone except me started discussing floor plans and looked at housing designs on the computer. When I tried to see what they were doing while having tea, she yelled at me, "You don't need to see this. Go away." I was surprised to learn that they were planning to build a new house instead of renovating the current one. My father-in-law had mentioned expanding the house because it was getting cramped. It seems that's what they're actually planning. My in-laws, who retired from their government jobs, have a lump sum of retirement money. I guess they intend to use that money to build a new house. And since I moved in, they've been living on their pension without paying any living expenses, so they should have plenty of money. I decided to distance myself from the situation. What worries me is whether my sister-in-law plans to live in the new house too. She's 28 years old and could get married, but there's been no talk of that, so I assume she'll be living in the new house. I dislike her as much as I do my mother-in-law because she never helps with any chores and is always complaining. I wish she would get married soon, but my father-in-law told the home builder, my daughter and her husband, my son, and us, "Can we add another room? I want a house where all 3 households can live together." It was surprising to hear that my sister-in-law's husband might also live with us. But what's more surprising is that it's not about my son's family, but just my son. I was shocked that I wasn't included. The house they're planning to build is supposed to be quite big, but even so, the current site won't fit 3 households comfortably. Since my in-laws and sister-in-law are the ones building the house, I can't say anything, but I think keeping it clean will be a challenge. The man went out to see the model room and the construction site later. "You stay out of this. It's none of your business," my mother-in-law said spitefully. She probably expected me to argue back. She gave me a disapproving look when I didn't. It seems that the housing construction is moving forward. I'm not being told anything, but my in-laws and sister-in-law are getting ready for the move. Seeing my husband not doing anything, I asked, "Aren't you going to help with the move?" "Why should I? Aren't you the one handling it?" My husband got angry when he heard me speaking as if it were someone else's responsibility. I'm confused why he's getting mad when I don't even know when or where we're moving. Later on, whenever I had time, I started preparing for the move, but I packed our belongings separately. I was tired of my mother-in-law's attitude, and I was also feeling suspicious about my husband because of the new house. "When are we moving?" I asked my husband to confirm. "Just get ready. You don't need to know." "That's it," he replied. From conversations during meals, I gathered that the move was probably happening soon. But strangely, they're not telling me anything. Do they see me just as a housemate? I only found out about the move when the movers arrived. As I rushed, we started cleaning up the breakfast dishes. "Leave them. We'll buy new ones." "By the way, do you plan to move into the new house with us?" my mother-in-law asked. In that moment, I realized they were purposely excluding me from discussions about the new house's layout. And keeping me in the dark about the moving day was all part of their plan to kick me out of my in-laws' house. My husband, standing behind my mother-in-law and laughing, didn't say anything. He probably agrees with them. I had packed my things separately from my husband because I had a feeling this would happen. Now I'm being faced with hatred. From now on, only the family will live here. "Do as you wish," my mother-in-law said, looking displeased. My sister-in-law, looking worried, probably thought I begged to come with them while crying. Not happy with my reaction, my mother-in-law snapped, "Anyone who relies on someone else's earnings should leave now. James will build the new house and pay off the loan with his salary. We don't need a freeloader," she yelled angrily. I was actually the one planning to leave. When I heard about the mortgage repayment coming from my husband's salary, I had to hold back my laughter. It seemed my husband hadn't been informed by his mother about this plan. He looked surprised but realized he couldn't contradict his angry mother, so he just remained silent. It seemed his parents believed they wouldn't need to use their retirement money, and instead their son would pay off the loan and build a new house. I found it intriguing how they planned to handle the loan repayment, so I informed them with a smile, "Got it. I've decided to proceed with divorcing James." So I told them, "You all go ahead and move to the new house." My mother-in-law didn't like my reaction and started shouting, but my father-in-law and sister-in-law pulled her away, and they left the house. To my husband, who stayed behind, I said, "We'll bring the divorce papers later, so please give me your new address. I'm sure it's a splendid house. Since I haven't been informed at all, I'd like to see it." Reluctantly, my husband gave me the address. Since I didn't have many belongings, a friend helped me move them. Then, I changed all the public utility bills for my in-laws' house to my husband's name. I went back to my parents' house for the time being, and once I was settled, I went to the address my husband gave me to get his signature on the divorce papers. The new house where my husband and his family moved was indeed impressive. It was a grand 3-family home. As soon as my mother-in-law spotted me, she hurried over and yelled, "What are you doing here?" Ignoring her outburst, I asked my husband to sign the divorce papers. My mother-in-law then turned to him and said, "Useless wife. It's because she's not a government worker. Hurry up and say it." With a sarcastic tone, I turned to my mother-in-law and remarked, "What a splendid house. Are you sure you can afford it with James' salary?" My mother-in-law's face turned red with anger. "You're the outsider now, so don't concern yourself with us. Take the divorce papers and leave," she snapped. I wanted to savor the sight of my husband's pale face a little longer, but I grabbed the divorce papers and left immediately, keeping an eye on my furious mother-in-law. I went straight to the town hall to submit the papers and decided to start looking for a new place for myself. Feeling worn out from married life after that ordeal, I opted to live alone in a small apartment for a while. I found a property near my workplace that suited my needs, so I moved in right away and started afresh. Life became so much more comfortable without roommates boasting about being government workers or leaving all the chores to me. Just as I was starting to put my husband out of my mind, I suddenly received a call from an unfamiliar number. "I can't pay the loan, Julie. Will you come back to me?" "I'm calling from a friend's phone. I can't afford to pay the mortgage, electricity, water bills, or even my phone bill," my ex-husband said, his voice breaking with tears. I assumed he could ask his family for help, so I suggested, "Your sister has a stable job, and your parents are retired with pensions. They should have some savings, right?" When I dismissed his plea, my husband reluctantly confessed, "Actually, they don't have any savings left. My sister has debts and no extra money." Listening to my husband, it became clear that their retirement savings were nearly wiped out due to investment fraud, and his sister, who lived with their parents, had racked up significant debt by overspending on credit. This proud family of civil servants had nothing to hide. While I was living with them, they might have been able to keep it under wraps. But now that they've moved to a new house, they seem to be struggling to manage their lives and reach out to me out of desperation. However, I had no intention of reuniting with them. I declined their plea and ended the call. After that, the phone rang numerous times, but I continued to ignore it until the calls eventually ceased. Later, when I visited their new house, I noticed a for sale sign. There happened to be someone from the housing company there, so I couldn't resist asking about the in-law family. It turns out they sold the house immediately after it was built, but they still had a remaining loan. The housing company representative also mentioned, "I was surprised by that family. Despite their boasting, they said they would sell right away if they couldn't repay the loan because our relative was a cosigner. It seems to have caused some trouble. It seems that because a relative cosigned their loan, that relative had to take on the debt. Once this became known, considering their past boasting about being civil servants, it appears they're now facing ostracism from their relatives. It's not surprising, really. They caused trouble for a relative who works in a private company by involving them as a cosigner." As I relaxed on my sofa at home, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of imagining what my ex-husband and his family, who no longer had anyone to boast to about being civil servants and were now seen as a nuisance by their relatives,